Hi, this is DLI Chin. Today, we are going to have a professional development session on disciplinary literacy in mathematics. So, welcome everyone. The purpose of today's session is to share some recent research on disciplinary literacy on math with the purpose of supporting math teachers in teaching writing in math. So to do this, we are going to discuss some specific features of the math discipline. We'll look at math disciplinary literacy versus general literacy, and then we'll practice several strategies that can be used with students. I am hoping that when you leave today, you are going to be taking with you a couple of ideas that you can implement tomorrow in your classroom. So let's just start by talking about some of the characteristics of math. So this should be easy for you, of course, because you are 9th and 10th grade teachers, math teachers, and I assume that you are teaching because you really love math. So on the next slide, I will show you 3 quotes about math. So take a minute to read them. Which quote do you feel best describes your understanding of math? And why. So later on, we'll have some share time, but first we'll spend just 1 minute quietly reading and thinking. Now that you've had a minute to read and think about the quotes, please turn to your table partners and share with them what you think. Again, the question is, which quote do you feel best describes your understanding of math and why? All right, I heard some great comments shared at each table. Would anyone like to share out? So as you're sharing, I'm going to jot down some notes on the whiteboard about the characteristics of the math discipline. So we now have started a great list of the characteristics of math. Many of you talked about the importance of patterns and logic and using symbols in solving math equations. So we're going to come back to this in a minute, but for now, I would like to point out the Common Core standards that link writing to math, because at this district, our instruction, of course, has to be aligned to Common Core state standards. Now, as you know, the Common Core state standards have raised expectations for the level of reading and writing that students are expected to accomplish at every grade level. There are standards for literacy in history and social studies, science, and technical subjects for grades 6 through 12. Hence the oft repeated phrase, every teacher is a reading teacher. So I'm guessing that you have gone through training when you've been told that you are a literacy teacher, and you might have thought to yourself, but why? I teach math. So so we'll talk about that connection, okay? So here's a look at some of the standards. The Common Core Standard, ELA standard for literacy in science and technical subjects. Math appears specifically in Standard 7. Translate quantitative or technical information expressed in words in a text into a visual form, for example, table or chart, and translate information expressed visually or mathematically, such as an equation, into words. So on the chart where you had talked about the special characteristics of math, you talked about representing the world in symbols. So here we have a standard where students have to make the link between symbols and words. And then there are other standards where math is not specifically spoken of, but math is implied. For example, standard 4, determine the meaning of symbols, key terms, and other domain-specific words and phrases as they are used in a specific scientific or technical context relevant to grades 9, 10 texts. Standard 5, analyze the structure of the relationships among concepts in a text, including relationships among key terms. The example given here was force, friction, reaction force, energy, but we can also use the standard and apply it to some math concepts like integers, natural numbers, positive numbers, and so forth. Now, literacy researchers generally describe literacy in math in two ways. One is to approach it from general literacy strategies. By general literacy strategies, I mean literacy skills that can be applied to any subject area. This would be like decoding text, reading comprehension, listening and speaking, fluency. So some of the example strategies that you might use during math class to help your students learn how to read would be things like visualization to help with reading comprehension. Or students might use quick writes to practice writing. You might also provide some sentence frames when they are discussing to help them learn some vocabulary and also to give some structure to their sentences to help with the syntax, right? So I've spoken to several of you, and you mentioned that when in previous PD sessions, when you were told to teach literacy, like this is a direction that you have been asked to go. And these are the strategies that have been shared with you at previous PD sessions. Another way of thinking about literacy in math, though, is to think of it as math disciplinary literacy. Also, it's kind of a mouthful, so sometimes people would just say DLI. And this refers to literacy skills uniquely used in math. So again, math DLI refers to literacy skills uniquely used in math. Disciplinary literacy is using thinking, reading, and writing skills in a way that is unique to the discipline. So to understand this, we need to think about the word literacy and think about what is special about math. When it comes to literacy, traditionally people have thought of it as just reading and writing. If you are literate, you can read and write. But really, it should also encompass listening and speaking, because listening, speaking, reading, writing all come together in the acquisition of a language. And literacy really has to do with thinking, and in particular, writing. You don't just think before writing. The actual process of writing helps you to think, and it makes you think. So if you are a highly literate person, you can leverage your literacy skills to help you to think, right? So your the cognitive and the language functions of your brain are intricately tied. And then moving on to what makes math unique. At the beginning of session, we wrote those down. So to put those two together, teaching literacy in math might include teaching students how to think in symbols, or how to look for patterns and express that information, that express that knowledge and understanding in words. How to bridge the gap between thinking of the world in symbols and describing situations with prose. So this might be kind of odd to you, thinking that phrasing what you've always known about math as DLI. So let's talk about this a little bit more. DLI what would it look like in English class? Well, in English class, it's important to learn how to interpret stories and write about them. So students have to learn how to read text very closely and pay attention to the characters' feelings. So in English class, you wouldn't just teach general literacy strategies, but you will also support students to read text in a particular way and to use language in a particular way, to have fun with language. Whereas in math class, students have to practice being logical and precise. Here's a different way to think about DLI. In any academic discipline, you can describe the discipline in terms of its epistemology, or what makes something true. How do you know something is true in that discipline? You can talk about its discourse. That would be what kind of communication and language is used. And you can also talk about its vocabulary, the unique words used in that discipline. In math, epistemology in math would look like this. Students need to learn how to solve problems and find patterns. How do students know if they have the right answer? This is something that probably you go through every day. Students apply a formula, but to solve a problem, but they don't just need to know how to solve. Like they need to learn how to think like a mathematician, which is how do they know that the answer is correct? For this course, students need to represent a problem using symbols. They explain how they solve the problem using symbols and words. And for vocabulary, this would include mathematical symbols, units of measurement, words that relate to computational or mathematical concepts such as more than or difference. So let's just pause for a moment here to discuss. Have you heard the phrase disciplinary literacy before? What does math literacy mean to you? Moving on, we are going to talk about some sample math writing strategies so that you can use these in class tomorrow or next week. So the source for my strategies is from a wonderful book on DLI by Zygoras Ko, and she talks in great detail about the need for DLI, and so I highly recommend this book if you have more time to read up on this topic. So one of the ideas she has for teaching students to write in math is to describe or interpret a graph. Students are given a statistical graph from a newspaper article and are asked to interpret what is being presented. Students describe what the graph tells the reader and what the graph does not tell the reader. Students write about what they notice and list additional questions. So here is an example of a graph taken from Pew Research Center. It talks about where Americans get their news from. This is something that I think is quite relevant given the recent election. So the way I would do this is show the students the graph and have them take some notes in the journal, and afterwards chat with their group mates, and then finally present out in class. Some of the questions I might ask would be, what does the graph tell you? What does the table below tell you? What is the relationship between the graph and the table? What do the figures not tell you? I think the fourth question is especially important to the students because they often overextend or assume that the graphs have more data than they really have. So let's think about this. If you were to use this in your classroom, what are some sentence frames that you might come up with to help your student with the listening and speaking portion of your discussion? Okay, great. Thank you for your input. We're going to move on to a second strategy. This one is to connect the mathematical significance with a real-life event or phenomenon. So for example, on the Domino's website allows you to build your own pizza, but it doesn't tell you how much the pizza costs until you have actually finished building it. So what you can do is have students go to the website and use linear equations to find the base price and then the cost per topping. The base price will be X, and then the price per topping would be Y, and they can build a linear equation to show the real cost. This would probably be something pretty fun for the students. So let's just pause for a moment and discuss. How does disciplinary literacy fit in with the way you currently understand literacy and math? All right, now that we've had some time to share, I would like to hand out a list of more strategies from the same book to you, and these are all writing and math strategies. So please take a moment to read these and put a check mark next to the strategies you currently use. Put a circle next to the strategies you would like to try. After 2 minutes, please discuss in your group which ones appeal to you. In conclusion, teaching literacy in math includes teaching students how to think, act, speak, and write like mathematicians. General literacy strategies should be used alongside disciplinary literacy strategies. Not only do we have to support our students in reading, they have to learn how to act like mathematicians.